Hikmat. Start of the quote. Capital punishment is a state terminology for murder. Individuals murder each other, but the state sentenced individuals to capital punishment. The demand to end capital punishment and prohibit murder stems from opposition to intentional, deliberate, and planned murder of one by other. That a state or ruling political force are responsible does not make the slightest difference to the fact that we are dealing with intentional murder. Capital punishment is the most deplorable and appalling form of intentional murder, since a political authority publicly, with prior notice on behalf of society, with the utmost legitimacy and ruthlessness, decides to murder someone and announces the date and time of the event. End of the quote. As you know, the Islamic Republic of Iran, along with China, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Egypt, are one of the 5 countries with the highest number of executions. The struggle to abolish the death penalty in Iran is an important step in building a world without the death penalty. The Islamic Republic has repeatedly proven that it will not respect human rights through dialogue. Therefore, we emphasize the global pressure on the Islamic Republic needs to increase, and the international community must protest more strongly against the executions in Iran. The Islamic Republic must abolish or virtually end the death penalty in Iran. A regime that cannot respect this demand must be politically boycotted. I hope that in cooperation with each other, we can have an Iran and a world without the death penalty. Thank you all again for attending this seminar. So from now on, I can invite the speakers of this panel one by one. So I believe without further delay, we go to Mats Gunnarsson from Sweden. Do you hear me, Mats? Mats Gunnarsson, dear technical team, can you please bring Mats Gunnarsson? Please, technical team, you need to unmute, apparently. Right now, host is Babak, I believe.
Okay, it's working now. Okay, sorry guys. Now anybody can unmute himself. So whoever is the speaker, he can unmute himself. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Hamajan, you can call the whoever is supposed. Nah. Okay, try now. You should be able to unmute yourself. Anybody who is a speaker,
Yes.
he can
Now it's working. No.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I got the admin now, so anybody can unmute himself. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, please welcome Mats.
Thank you very much, Hamid, and everyone for letting me join this conference, this important conference. This is a very important matter with such prominent speakers, so I'm feeling a little bit nervous. I would also like to apologize for any inappropriate use of English. It's not my working language normally, but I hope the message will get through anyway. Normally, I'm working with healthcare issues and public transport and such stuff, but this brings me back to the more fundamental issues of human rights and politics. As a person born and raised in the northern of Sweden, Europe, it is sometimes difficult to imagine how death penalty is used in other parts of the world. But just because of that, it is even more important to talk about it and create awareness, also in the parts of the globe where it seems so far away. Why is death penalty such a disgrace in a modern society? And how is it used in states ruled by dictators or corrupt regimes? Let us first take a look at the issue from the human rights perspective. When a society uses death penalty, it is a signal to the people that killing is an acceptable revenge, but also that the legal system is perfect and cannot commit any mistakes. But if the court sentences someone innocent to death penalty, and the penalty is executed, there is no way to repair the damage. A life is lost, and there is no possibility to set things right again. To the relatives and the children, to the mother and the father, the wife or the husband, the loss is eternal, and there is no way to change that. If someone innocent is sent to prison, it's horrible. But the mistake can be revealed, and the innocent person can go back to freedom and hopefully meet the loved ones again. In that case, some kind of compensation could be given. But when someone's life is taken, it's not possible. Using death penalty is also a very strong way to silence the freedom of speech. If you want to threaten people to make them stop raising opposition or complaining about the government, death penalty is a very strong tool. Most of us are ready to sacrifice a lot, but not to risk our lives. Sometimes it's easy to understand strong feelings that call for death penalty. When totally innocent people, even children, are killed in acts of terror. Like the case of the madman in Oslo and Utøya, or the ongoing attacks in Afghanistan, Iran, or Iraq, or parts of Africa. But we must keep our head cool. The responsible persons must be stopped and sent to prison, sometimes for the rest of their lives. But if we kill them, it will be a way of accepting their way of thinking and losing the battle. Globally, there was a positive movement away from death penalty during the 20th century. But today we have seen backlashes, and there is a need for a strong and clear signal from both the people and the leaders of the free parts of the world. China, Iran, and Saudi Arabia is in a poor position as leaders of the killing league. They have both strong positions as military power nations, but both are just as any modern nation, strongly depending on the global economy. Therefore, there must be an effective way to take them to change their behavior. And the best way is a common action. We are leaders in countries who still use death penalty to stop immediately. The United Nations and the European Union and other structures must use every means available to affect the countries that are still breaking the fundamental rules of humanity. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to listening to the following speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mats. Thank you very much. I think it's a good idea to give everyone the list, the schedule of the speakers. After Mats, Dieter Karg will speak, and after that, Camilla Hansen, Mariam Namazi, Ulrike Becker, Izzat Mosalla Nejad, Janine Almerickson, and Mina Ahadi will speak consecutively. Hopefully, if Reza Moridi is also added to our meeting. So let's go to the next speaker, Dieter Karg, Amnesty International. Please welcome, Dieter.
Welcome too. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Should I start?
Please.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm happy to meet so many people who are also working against the death penalty. As you said, I'm a member of the Iran coordination group in Germany of Amnesty International. And I'm going to shorten a little bit my speech because I think all of you are well informed about the death penalty in Iran. So in 2 days, on the 10th of October, is the International Day Against the Death Penalty. Maybe you have scheduled this seminar because of this important date. Iran is one of the worst countries in the respect of death penalty. Amnesty International demands the complete abolition of the death penalty for all offenses, as it is a cruel and irreversible punishment. In the case of Iran, there are additionally the following reasons for serious concern. The death penalty is applied after unfair trials and often based on confessions, which are not really confessions, but they are extracted under torture. It's applied for offenses which are not considered as the most serious crimes internationally. So, for example, drug trafficking or rape or something like that. It's used as a means to intimidate the population because it also hits political opponents. Just in recent times, there has been the execution of Navid Afkari, and others have been sentenced to death. Amir Hossein Moradi, Said Tamjidi, Mohammad Rajabi. And their execution could only be prevented by huge protests inside and outside Iran. It often hits members of ethnic minorities, such as Kurds or Ahwazi Arabs, who are accused of cooperation with armed resistance groups. It is also applied to juvenile offenders who were under 18 at the time of their offense. This also contradicts international agreements and laws. And as I said, Iran is the country with the second highest rate of executions in the world, behind China. There are no figures published by our organization yet for 2020. I think it's going to happen quite soon. In the context of this International Day Against the Death Penalty. I've looked a little bit on other websites from January to June 2020. The Iran Human Rights Monitor recorded over 100 executions, but only 30 were officially confirmed. This is another reason why we criticize or are very concerned about the situation in Iran, because many of these executions happen in secret. Yes. there is one positive development that we have found out in recent years. I think it has also happened because of international pressure. For the death penalty for drug offenses has been reduced, and so the numbers have dropped. So before 2017, there were the executions or the death sentences for drug trafficking were the highest, and it was the biggest share of the death penalties. And now this is much lower. There are, in the last year, 2019, there were just 30 executions for drug trafficking and 196 for murder, but also 8 for enmity against God, muharebe, and then spreading corruption on earth. There were 2 executions. But these are only the cases which are known. So we think many more happen in secrecy. Yes, so this is my overview over the situation. There are shocking cases of executions after unfair trials, and where, for example, the confessions were extracted under torture, the lawyers were not informed beforehand, or, for example, in the case of Navid Afkari, he was secretly killed before all legal means had been exhausted. And often families are not informed before or in advance. They only learn it later on. So this is a very bleak situation, and it can only be hoped that by international pressure, this situation can be improved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dieter. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I have to be very brief. If the technical team can inform me, if we have Reza Moridi here, he can.
Yes, Hamadan. Reza Moridi is in Skype, and he is going to speak on Skype, but I'm going to have his voice here. So Reza Jan, Mr. Moridi, you can start your speech. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Babajan, and good afternoon and good evening to our friends who are in Europe. It's a pleasure to be a part of this event today. And I want to begin by thanking the organizers of this this very appropriate event, in particular Ms. Mina Ahadi and other activists and members of the community who have been working very hard over decades in relation to the violation of human rights in Iran. The violation of human rights in Iran has its many dimensions, and of course the worst part is execution, which this government and this regime never stopped killing Iranians and killing people since they came to the office about 41 years ago, and that trend continues almost continuously, I should say. And the most recent high-profile case was Navid Afkari, as the speaker before me referred to Navid's case. But after Navid, again, they killed several other people. So this barbaric act of the Iranian regime has been in place for decades, as I said, and will continue until as long as this regime is in office in Iran. I want to thank the International Amnesty and International Amnesty's branches, in particular in Canada, in Toronto, for their assistance, for their help over decades when it came to the Iranian community here and the protest against execution in Iran, against violation of human rights in Iran. They always have been beside the Iranian community and the Iranian people, and for that we extend our sincere thanks and gratitude to them. As again you heard from the previous speaker, Iran is amongst the worst countries in the world when it comes to execution per capita. I was told that Iran is number 1 or number 2 in that ranking, and this is very, very unfortunate that a country with more than 2,500 years of documented civilization, the country of poetry, the country of culture, the country of philosophy, the country of humanity, the country of science, but all those contributions that Iran has made to the human civilization over the centuries, and now, excuse me, and now there's a regime there which is fixated itself in the religious ideology and keep killing people and keep interfering in affairs of its neighbors and so on and so forth. So we are really unfortunate in that sense that such a government, such a regime, and such people are now ruling this ancient country. But on the other side, humanities around the world are not going to stop, and indeed Iranians are not going to stop from what they have been doing in terms of protesting to this regime, in terms of raising their voices against this regime and against lobbying and within the international community, whether that might be international agencies such as United Nations and others, or organizations such as the International Amnesty, as well as governments in the Western and the free world, to expose this regime's atrocities as much as they can. And this is what many Iranian activists and many Iranian opposition groups and the parties, political parties, they have been doing for decades. And this will continue until this regime leaves the country and the the will of the people, I should say, will be established in Iran. But let us hope that the world will stop executing human beings, not only in Iran, but in other countries as well. We know still in many countries, including our neighbor to the south in the US, there is capital punishment there by law. And this has to be really abolished. I am so glad that I am a Canadian, and in this country of mine, Canada, and the many of us in this forum, there's no capital punishment, and this has to be the case in every country around the world. So with that, again, I want to thank all of you for your participation on this very significant day, and also, again, I'm grateful to the organizers for bringing all of us in this room so that we can speak, we can exchange our ideas, and a little bit raise our voice against those people who have no respect to humanities. They do to their fellow humans, which animals won't do to their own race. And with that, again, I want to thank you all, and I wish you all the best, and let us hope the best for humans, for 7.5 billion of us living in our big country, planet Earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Reza.
Thank you, Reza Moridi. I'm glad that we could finally manage to have you with us here. Without further delay, let's go to the next speaker, Camilla Hansen from Sweden. Please welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me good?
Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to this important conference to raise awareness around the World Day Against Death Penalty. I am a member of the Swedish Parliament representing the Green Party, and I serve on the Standing Committee on the Constitution. Among the responsibilities for this Standing Committee is to stand up for human rights, for freedom of speech, freedom of opinion. This could be defending freedom of information, freedom of expression your opinions in different ways, on the radio, on the internet, in a demonstration, or other ways of expressing opinions. This committee that I am serving on is also now say the guardians of the constitutional laws that we have in Sweden. It is in those laws that we forbid capital punishment and also forbids torture and other degrading punishments. In democratic countries where rule by law is accepted, there is an awareness that even if you try, the judicial system will have flaws. It will not be perfect. Now, this is one reason among many others that death penalty always should be abolished. And it is a risk for the state, because the worst is that the state itself actually is committing murder on an innocent person. This is something that cannot be taken back or adjusted or paid for in any way, and it's something that you that when it's done, it is done. 1/3 of the world states still apply death penalty according to Amnesty, and there are even if they are becoming fewer and fewer, there should of course be none of the countries in the world using those kind of punishments. Well, this was interesting. Suddenly, my prepared notes disappeared. So I would round this off with explaining that this is important to us. In countries like Sweden, where, as Mats described, we feel like we are far away. And as a politician in Sweden, I am in a safe place expressing my opinions and political views. And without you sharing your stories about what is going on in the world, we will not be able to stand up for humanity, for human rights. And I think there is a special responsibility for us that can express our opinions in a safe way to actually say those things that might be difficult or even dangerous for political activists and any person in some countries that are using these kinds of punishments. So thank you for sharing, and by that giving us the opportunity to maybe help in some other way. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. Thank you for your speech. Okay, we go to the next speaker. Mariam Namazi, please. The floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Thank you for having me here today, and I'm really happy to be amongst you discussing an important issue, which is the death penalty and the fact that there are still too many countries in the world that continue to punish people by death, including, of course, Iran, which is in the top 5, China, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and so on. And I think a couple of other speakers did talk about it. Very often the death penalty is portrayed as something that helps to prevent crime, that makes society safer. But actually what we see is countries where there is the death penalty, it's got heightened violence in those countries. It's not safe by any means, because obviously you can't kill people to show that killing is wrong. And in fact, that's just a form of propaganda for states that commit the death penalty. The reality of the death penalty is in order to create fear, to make sure that people know their place in society, and to make sure that people know who is in charge at all times. And I think you see that in different ways being shown in the United States with its institutionalized racism, and how a vast number of people being killed are Black and minority, particularly men. And in Iran too, it is people who dissent, people who transgress social norms, very often executed on trumped up charges. So I think, one of the things that we need to make sure people understand is that this has nothing to do about safety and everything to do with control and repression, state control and state repression. And I think it was Hormoz initially in his welcome speech, he mentioned Mansour Hikmat's piece on this. It is really a seminal piece on the death penalty in Iranian history. It was written 20 years ago. It speaks about how the death penalty is a deplorable form of premeditated murder. And I think that is how we need to look at this. It is a form of premeditated murder, worse than any other murder that any citizen may commit, because the state does it on behalf of society and even lists the time and date of the execution. This is something that Mansour Hekmat says. So the fact that it is so deplorable, and it's something that I think we need to make very clear to those who still are unclear about whether they're fully against the death penalty. I think one of the things we see too is that governments often focus on the most vilified and the most vulnerable. You know, they go after them as a way of making it normal in a sense, so that they can then come after everybody else. So I think it is one of those things that the calling for its abolition is very integral to a defense of human rights. Not a step-by-step abolition, as some might say. There is no step-by-step progress when it comes to human rights. It has to be all or nothing, I think, and I think that's something that's very clear. The International Committee Against Executions and Nina Hadi have really been at the forefront of fighting against executions for many decades. It was not something that was necessarily as accepted as widespread as it is today, and I think that is a success of that campaign, and also people seeing the realities of what the death penalty really represents in a place like Iran. Today, we can see this very widespread protest against executions. I think we saw it against stonings many years ago, where the Iranian regime was no longer able to stone people in public because of the rage that it created. There were even instances where people tried to pull the woman in question out, and they were forced to then institute a moratorium on stoning. And I think with executions today, we are seeing that widespread condemnation of executions in Iran. It is a society that is very anti the death penalty. And if you look at just the recent cases that I think Max mentioned, the case of three of many people who are on death row, but it is three of the protesters, Amir Hossein Moradi, Mohammad Rajabi, and Saeed Tamjidi. We know that there was a huge social media campaign calling for their executions to be stopped, and there was about 4.5 million retweets of this demand. So it is a very widespread demand, and I think you know, this is something that we have to build on. Societies that abolish the death penalty. Sudan recently abolished the death penalty, so it's very much possible, and protest is key in helping to bring about abolition. I think the other very important case, which was already mentioned, was that of Navid Afkari. You know, I think his case has made it very clear to people what the death penalty really is for. He himself said that he realized that they were just looking for a neck to put their noose around. It, you know, that there is no justification for it, that it is so inhuman and unfair. And I think that a movement that was just outraged at Navid Afkari's execution is another step towards this demand for abolition. And I think very clearly we are hearing voices calling for the Islamic Republic of Iran to be banned from sports, international sports, because of their murder of this young wrestler, Navid Afkari, but also this ongoing demand for pressure against the Iranian regime to be boycotted because of the vast human rights violations, the continued executions of opponents, political prisoners, free thinkers, blasphemers, apostates. And I think that's something that we as abolitionists need to build on, and it, of course, it's so welcome, but a lot of work needs to be done, and I think we just need to keep pushing forward until we do get abolition everywhere. But also, I think when we're talking specifically a bit about Iran, you know, there has to be this demand for the Iranian regime to be boycotted politically, to be isolated politically, diplomatically, put under pressure, so that there is not any more Navid Afkaris. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. It's a pleasure to hear you once again. Thank you. So after Mariam, we will go to Ulrike Becker, and I just to get back that after Ulrike, if it's possible, we can have Ezzat Musallanejad, please. So I invite Ulrike Becker to take over. Please welcome.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, clearly.
Thank you for having me. My name is Ulrike Becker. I'm the head of research of a small NGO in Germany called Mid-East Freedom Forum Berlin. And I would like to focus on Iran as well today. The Islamic Republic in Iran claims to respect sacred laws. It is in the name of God that the government executes men, women, and young people because they had violated a supposedly divine order. It is in the Islamic Republic of Iran that the highest number of executions per capita is recorded worldwide. It is in the Islamic Republic of Iran that the highest proportion of women and juveniles are executed. It is in...
I believe
huh?
we lost her voice, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike, could you please don't interrupt?
Okay. The regime in Tehran can only assert itself against its own population with terror. The dictatorship in Tehran is practically at war with its own people. Apart from the numbers, another huge problem is the number of crimes which are punishable by death in Iran. This number of crimes is also among the highest in the world. Many of the charges punishable by death cannot be considered as most serious crimes and do not meet the standards of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Among the capital offenses in Iran are charges such as adultery, incest, rape, sodomy, insulting the Prophet Muhammad and other prophets, possessing illicit drugs, theft for the fourth time, and fraud. Punishable by death is also war against God, corruption on earth, and rebellion. The concept of rebellion was introduced 2013 in the Islamic Penal Code. Corruption on earth is defined to be a person who, for example, commits a crime on an extensive level against the domestic or external security, spreads lies, or disrupts the national economic system. And this means that this article can be used against participants of uprisings against the Islamic Republic and stipulates that these people shall be sentenced to death. And the most famous case was the champion wrestler Navid Afkari. Others spoke on his case, so I will be brief and just say some more words. Besides the executions of prisoners, there's also the bloody crackdown of the protests in Iran. Like in November 2019, hundreds of people were shot to death by the security forces. Reuters reported that 1,500 people were killed. So the situation in Iran for the people is alarming. And the Iranian people, and particularly those who are fighting for freedom in Iran, urgently need the support and solidarity of the democratic world. And I think that really public pressure on the government can help to save the lives of those affected. The European countries, and particularly Germany, where I am from, which maintains good relations with the regime in Iran, must take action. European governments and parliaments should condemn the planned executions in a clear public, and unambiguous manner. In addition, we need tough sanctions that should be imposed on all judges and judicial officials involved. The US government has demonstrated that this is possible. Sanctions should be imposed on economic, financial, political, and diplomatic levels. There should be no more receptions of members, official receptions of members of the Iranian government in European countries. I would like to call upon German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas and Chancellor Angela Merkel and all their counterparts in all European countries to show their solidarity with the democratic protests in Iran by publicly receiving Iranian opposition members. Only support for the freedom fighters and political pressure on the government of the Islamic Republic can save the lives of the prisoners in Iran and can also protect all other critical voices. Thank you again for having me here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ulrike, and thank you for having the best audio and video quality combined so far. So, dear Babak, can you please bring Izzat Mosaddanejad?
Yeah, Izzat is here. Izzat, it's your turn. Go ahead. Start your speech.
Thank you very much. I start with the fact that death penalty is a kind of torture. By the time one receives the court order, some people cannot stand it and collapse. And in one case in Mumbai, when Ajmal Amir Kassav received the death penalty, although he was a very, very strong and cruel man, he collapsed and asked for a glass of water. The moment of arrest, torturers used the threat of death to prisoners in order to extract information or confession from them. The whole process up to the time of a trial and beyond, the whole family goes through the trauma. And in cases of human rights activists, the whole society might go through the trauma. Another case of torture in death penalty is the death row. It starts from the time one receives the order to the time of the execution of the order. It may take few days, it may take even few years. During all this time, Damocles' sword is hanging over the victim, and torturers used their method to threaten that any moment we are going to take you to the execution site. The method of execution, whatever it is torturous. So let's start with the firing squad. It may not, so taking the victim to the execution site, preparing the squad, and even after shooting, the victim does not die. And in Iran, for example, they leave them to die without using the last bullet. Hanging is not the end of life. So in the case of the murder of Mahatma Gandhi in 1949, it took him 15 minutes dangling over the gallows to die. It is highly torturous. And also beheading, gas chamber, and electrocution. All of them are very, very painful and torturous to the extent that the United States government has declared these methods inhumane. Lethal injection is also painful because it has 3 steps. The first step is with an injection. They make the victim unconscious. The second injection loosens the muscles, and with the third injection, heart stops functioning. It's a long process. And the people who perform this sinister method are not medical professionals, because according to the principles of medical ethics, they are banned from doing that. And they are unskilled technicians. It takes up to 10 minutes for the victim to die. And other methods of execution that are rampant in some countries, like Iran, Nigeria, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, is stoning. Stones should neither be big nor small to prolong the agony of death. It may take up to 4 hours for the victim to die. And in some cases, they also make the relatives, including children, to attend. And before performing the ominous act of stoning, they also torture the victim by telling him or her that this is the beginning. So when you die, we burn your body, and also in the hell you will face heinous tortures. So in all methods of execution are torturous. I want to add 2 points. One is the very ghoulish method used in Iran for the pregnant women. They have to die up to the birth of the child, and they then be executed. This is highly inhuman and barbarous, because you are waiting as a mother for your baby to come to celebrate. And with the celebration of the birth of baby, you have to die. Another limbo of death is conditional sentence to death. They keep them in jail forever, and they are already sentenced to death. Any change of the policy or anything that prisoners don't like may lead to the execution. That is again the specter of death hanging over the head of the victim. So, according to Article 2 of the Convention Against Torture, torture is absolutely prohibited in international law. And so, if torture is absolutely prohibited and death penalty is a torture, then death penalty should be abolished all over the world. It is very fortunate that 58 countries of the world have, only 58 countries of the world actively proceed with death penalty, but they constitute 60% of the world's population. Iran, Indonesia, India, China, Japan, and Egypt, many other countries. Now the time has come for all of us to consolidate our solidarity and to do away once for all with this sinister act of our ancient barbarism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Azat.
Thank you so much, dear Zat. I'm glad that we could be able to have you with us. It's been over an hour, although we missed almost 10 minutes of the beginning of this meeting. I believe we could continue, and we won't need a break. Am I right, Babak?
Yeah, go ahead, no problem.
Okay, great. So we have 2 more speakers. It's time for Janine Elm Eriksson. Please welcome Janine.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to come and speak, but most of all, most important for me to listen to your stories. What I've heard here, and especially with the latest speaker, is it's striking how horrible people can be to each other, and how extra horrible it is when it's a state doing that to its their own citizens. So my name is Janine Alm Eriksson. I'm also from the Green Party, as Mats Gunnarsson and Camilla Hansen, who spoke before, and I agree with them with everything they say, so I will not repeat. And of course, with the rest of you who's also given the stories and thoughts about the death penalty, and especially in Iran, it's really horrible, and we should do everything we can to abolish it in Iran and everywhere else. And so I will just say briefly that Sweden has been imposing sanctions on Iran since 2011, as the regime got worse and worse after 2009, with the elections then, and the situation for human rights became even worse. And ever since, it has been including travel restrictions, frozen assets, and a ban on selling equipment that can be used for repression and surveillance. But at the same time, as you know, probably, the Sweden and the EU are trying to maintain relations with Iran and avoid sanctions that affect the entire population. Because the population is suffering anyway. And this has been more difficult since the United States imposed even harder sanction and isolated the country. And that has made the regime less sensitive to new pressure, which is, of course, a thing you can discuss what is the right way to do. But in this difficult situation too, we really try, and it's very, very important for us in Sweden, and especially for us Greens, that we always continue to criticize Iran's violation of human rights and the use of the death penalty. And we maintain harsh sanctions against those responsible for executions and repression of its own people. The situation now is really, really bad, as many of you have described. And but we know that in many places in the world that are secure, stable, and legally secure, predictable systems in the world. And with a change in Iran, that can, of course, be reached, which is really necessary. Because as we know, that totalitarian regimes, they do not care about their citizens. They don't have a record for it, and I think they will never do it because they just want to keep the power and stay in power to meet their own needs and for their own benefits. And so we're all behind you in the struggle of ending death penalty, capital punishment in Iran, and hope to be able to help all of you who's actively working on this, we as the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janine, and thank you for being so brief. I wish we could have more time, but it's time for our last speaker, Mina Ahadi. I hope we can hear her. Babak, please.
Okay, Mina, go ahead. It's your turn. Mina, yeah, Mina is going to speak from the Skype. So Mina jan, Hormoz jan be Mina بگو شروع کنه. Mina, it's your turn.
She's gonna speak in Persian, I believe, and then it's gonna be interpreted later.
Okay, Mina. شما صدای منو دارید توی چیز؟ یه لحظه اجازه بدید من ببینم که مشکل چی هست اینجا. Just give me 1 second. اوکی مینا ساری از اول شروع کنید لطفا از اول شروع کنید.
امیدوارم صدامو داشته باشید الان.
بله بله بله.
اوکی. ببخشید به خاطر مشکل فنی که ما داشتیم. من تشکر میکنم از همه عزیزانی که تو این برنامه شرکت کردن. ما شخصیت‌های مهمی رو از سراسر جهان دعوت کرده بودیم که تو این برنامه بودن. اولین پیامی که ما از طرف کمیته علیه اعدام داریم میدیم همین هست که اعدام وحشیانه است و در همه جای دنیا باید ممنوع بشه. در بیوگرافی خودم الان امروز شنیدید که من خودم 23 سالم بود که در ایران همسرم اعدام شد و زخم این واقعه وحشتناک خب بعد از 40 سال هنوز ترمیم نشده.
بلندگوتو ببند. اگه بتونی بلندگوتون رو ببندی صدا اکو نمیکنه. میکروفون نه بلندگو. آره. اگر نه یکم فاصله بگیر صحبت کنم.
با چیز حرف میزنم یه دقیقه ببخشید. اینطوری بهتره بابا؟
آره الان درست شد. ادامه.
یه بار دیگه. ببخشید به خاطر مشکل فنی من از اول شروع میکنم. تشکر میکنم از همه عزیزانی که تو این برنامه شرکت کردن. ما سعی کردیم از سراسر دنیای تعداد از دوستان سرشناس رو دعوت کنیم. ما از کانادا، از سوئد و از آلمان سخنرانانی داشتیم تو این برنامه و اولین پیامی که از طرف کمیته بین‌المللی علیه اعدام میخوام بدم همین هست که اعدام وحشیانه و غیر انسانیه و در همه جای دنیا باید ممنوع بشه. در این حال توی بیوگرافی من امروز گفتن که من خودم 23 سالم بود که همسرم در ایران اعدام شد و بعد از 40 سال هنوز این زخم برای خود من تازه است. یعنی میخوام تأکید کنم روی اینکه اعدام فقط اینطوری نیست که یک نفر اعدام میشه، یک خانواده در حقیقت دچار مشکل میشن و این مشکل همیشه باهاشون هست. ما در این حال با تأسیس کمیته بین‌المللی علیه اعدام از 16 سال قبل سعی کردیم به طور متمرکز بر علیه اعدام در ایران فعالیت کنیم و خود من با ده ها نفر محکوم به اعدام در سلولهای مرگ صحبت کردم و صداشون تو گوشهای من هست. صدای بهنود شجاعی، صدای علی مهین-ترابی، صدای بچه‌هایی که محکوم به اعدام بودن و جمهوری اسلامی با بیرحمی بهشون میگفت بمونید تا 18 ساله بشید بعد شما رو اعدام میکنیم. و من تو این کنفرانس مهم و بزرگ میخوام بگم بعضی از این بچه‌ها با من تماس میگرفتن میگفتن خاله مینا با مقامات دولت آلمان حرف بزن شاید کاری بکنن که ما رو نکشن. و به نظر من بزرگترین انتقادها به دولت آلمان و دولت‌های اروپایی هست. من با خانواده ده ها نفر حرف زدم و کمیته ما با صدها نفر در ایران محکومین به اعدام یا خانواده هاشون تماس داره و ما بارها کمپین هایی را سازمان دادیم که توجه دنیا رو به این معضل بزرگ جلب کنیم. کمپین هایی مثلا برای نجات ریحانه جباری، رامین حسین پناهی، کبرا رحمانپور، زانیار و لقمان مرادی و شهلا جاهد، فرزاد کمانگر و تعداد خیلی زیادی. یک کاری که ما سعی کردیم از 16 سال قبل انجام بدیم اونم اینه که صدای محکومین به اعدام در دنیا باشیم و در این حال تصویر اونا رو، حرفهای اونا رو، آرزوهای اونا رو در دنیا پخش کنیم. ما سعی کردیم تو این مدت با این پدیده خطرناک مقابله کنیم که یه فرد رو به عدد تبدیل میکنن و هر سال گزارشی میخوان بدن که مثلا در ایران 800 نفر اعدام شد بدون اینکه کسی بدونه اون فرد اعدام شده کشتیگیر جوان و زیبایی بود به اسم نوید افکاری و یا معلم مهربانی بود به اسم فرزاد کمانگر. دوستان گرامی، میخوام اینجا تاکید کنم یه جنبش بزرگ علیه اعدام در ایران هست که تونسته جان تعداد زیادی را نجات بده، اما حکومت اسلامی بر چوبه دار تکیه زده و همیشه دنبال گردنی هست برای اینکه تناب دار رو دور اون بندازه، برای اینکه این حکومت برای دوام و بقای خودش به اعدام احتیاج داره. الان پیام ما به همه سیاستمداران و دولت‌ها اینه که سیاست مماشات و نظاره کردن جنایات حکومت اسلامی رو تمام کنید. ما خواهان قطع کامل اعدام‌ها در ایران هستیم. ما خواهان لغو مجازات اعدام در ایران هستیم و از دولت‌های اروپایی و همه دولت‌ها می‌خوایم حکومت اسلامی ایران رو به عنوان قاتلین مردم ایران بایکوت سیاسی کنند. مادام این حکومت طناب دار رو برگردن جوانها، زنها، کودکان، همجنسگرایان، آتئیست‌ها و تمام کسانی که مخالفش هستند میندازه، نباید هیچ مقام حکومت اسلامی اجازه ورود به کشورهای دیگر رو داشته باشه و به عنوان نماینده یه حکومت عادی اونو به رسمیت بشناسد. دوستان گرامی، اعدام وحشیانه است و ما خانواده هایی که با اعدام یکی از عزیزانمون این رو تجربه کردیم دلمون آرام نمیگیره مگر اینکه قاتلین و سازمان دهندگان این جنایات در یک دادگاه بین المللی عادلانه محاکمه بشن و این امکان پذیره اگه دنیا در مقابل جنایات این حکومت سکوت نکنه و در کنار دادخواهان بایسته. اگر 10 اکتبر 2020 پیامی داشته باشه، پیامش همینه که نه به اعدام در ایران و همه دولت‌ها باید جمهوری اسلامی رو به عنوان حکومت اعدام بایکوت سیاسی کنند. خیلی ممنون.
مرسی. Ahmed, mic back to you.
Thank you, Mina Ahadi. I believe Nastaran Gudarzi is with us to interpret Mina's speech.
Yes, hello everyone. I translated Mina's speech. Thank you all for attending this important event. Our first message on the International Day against execution is that execution is brutal and inhuman and should be banned everywhere in the world. I was 23 years old when my husband was executed in Iran, and the wounds of this terrible incident are still fresh after 40 years. I have been fighting against the death penalty in Iran since the establishment of the International Committee Against Execution 16 years ago. And I have spoken to dozens of people sentenced to death in the prisons of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And their voices still ring in my ears. The voices of minor children sentenced to death, Behnoud Shojai and Ali Mahin Torabi, whom the Islamic regime, with complete cruelty, was waiting for them to turn 18 so they can execute them. One of these children begged me that, Aunt Mina, please talk to German government officials and ask them to do something so that they don't kill us. I have been in contact with the families of dozens of those who were executed, and our committee is in touch with hundreds of such families. We have organized many campaigns that have attracted the attention of the world. The campaign to rescue Reyhan Jabbari, Rami Hossein Panahi, Kobra Rostampur, and Zanyar and Luqman Muradi, and the campaign to save Shahla Jahed and Farzad Kamangar, to name a few. In the past 16 years, we have been determined to be the voice for those who were sentenced to death. We spread their words and images in the world. With this policy, we try to battle the dangerous idea of turning a person into a number. When some organizations reported that, for example, 800 people were executed in the past year, we struggle to let the world know that each victim of execution was a young, handsome wrestler named Navid Afkari, or a loving teacher named Farzad Kamankar. Dear friends, this is a massive movement against execution in Iran that has successfully saved the lives of many. But the gallows are the columns of the Islamic regime structure. They have always looked for another neck to throw their ropes around. This is the regime's policy for its own survival. Today, our message to all politicians and governments is that the policy of appeasement and witnessing the crime of the Islamic regime should end. We demand an ultimate stop of this verdict and the abolition of this penalty in Iran. We call on all the governments to politically boycott the Islamic Republic of Iran as the murderers of the Iranian people. While this regime executes the youth, women, children, LGBTQs, atheists, and protesters, no official of this government should be allowed into other countries and be accepted as a representative of murdering regime. Dear friends, execution is brutal, and we, the families who were wounded forever after the execution of a loved one, will not rest until the killers and organizers of these crimes are brought to justice in a fair international court. And this would be possible if the world doesn't remain silent against the crimes of this regime and support those who seek justice. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nastar, and thank you, Mina Ahadi. Okay, we have almost 7 minutes more to continue this meeting. I apologize for audio and other technical problems that we had during this meeting. We can spend the remaining minutes for questions. If the listeners and viewers of this meeting have questions, they can use the chat function here in the Zoom, and they can ask for a chance to ask their questions, or if our 9 speakers have any additional notes, they can also inform us in the chat section that they want to have some additional points for like 1 or 2 minutes that they can add.
Ahmed, I believe,
please.
Ahmed, Rahim is raising his hand since long. I don't know if it's by mistake or he wants to say something. Rahim Yazdan first.
I don't know, unfortunately. I didn't check the chat section. Maybe you can help me with this. If any of the speakers or the listeners have questions or additional notes to.
Okay. Okay, no, Rahim raised his hand by mistake. So any of the speakers had another extra points to say, please welcome. So it seems everybody is happy.
I don't see.
I'll just add a few points. I think, as we all discussed, the 10th of October is the International Day Against the Death Penalty. So it is important for us to bring these issues around this day as well, because there's going to be a lot of attention on the matter. So I think, you know, it is a good way of organizing further around this day. So, and I'm sure everyone here will be doing something for the International Day Against the Death Penalty. I would suggest that we do build on the outrage around Navid Afghari's execution, and this demand, this widespread demand for a ban of the Islamic Republic of Iran from international sports, as well as diplomatically, politically. So I think it's a great opportunity, and we have to take advantage of any opportunity in order to push forward this campaign against executions in Iran and everywhere.
Okay, thank you so much, Mariam. Please, dear Baba, can you help me if there are any more volunteers for the remaining minutes?
It seems everybody is okay. Mina, you want to have the last word?
Okay.
Mina. آره اگر آخرین کلام صحبتی داری شما لطفاً. Go ahead, Mina.
We have 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, Mina is having the last word. Go ahead, Mina جان بفرمایید.
اوکی. من تشکر میکنم از همه عزیزانی که تو این برنامه بودن و از همه کسانی که این برنامه رو میبینن یا بعداً خواهند دید. در هر حال به نظر من ما در آستانه این هستیم که اگر همه دست به دست هم بدیم اعدام در ایران رو ممنوع بکنیم و فشار بیاریم به دولت‌ها که بایکوت سیاسی بکنن جمهوری اسلامی رو. این برنامه به هر حال خیلی مهم بود برای ما. من یه بار دیگه تشکر میکنم از کسایی که تو این برنامه بودن و این برنامه رو تمام میکنیم به امید اینکه ما در آینده باز هم از این نوع نشست‌ها رو سازمان بدیم. خیلی ممنون از همه سخنران‌ها.
لطفاً اشاره هم بکنید تو 7-8 شهر تظاهرات داریم. اینم اشاره بکنید.
بله.
Okay, thank you, Mina, and thank you, dear Hassan. I just briefly, Mina, thanked all of the guests, all of the speakers that have been had give us the pleasure of having them in this meeting, and she thanked you, and she also emphasized on our struggle and our battle to put pressure on international community and trying to cut the political relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I personally wish everybody success in this battle, in this struggle for human rights that we have in every kind of different fields. And dear Hassan Salehi also mentioned that we are having in 7 or 8 cities, rallies in 7 or 8 cities around the world on 10th of October. That is also part of the International Committee Against Executions plans and attempts for this special day. So in the end, thank you everybody, and it's almost 1.5 hours. So goodbye and have a nice day or evening. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Hamid, and thanks, everybody. Today is the October the 8th, but we had it because some of the members of the parliament were closed on October the 10th, so we had it today. So hopefully by October the 10th, we have this video on YouTube and on the sites, everybody can see it. All the cities that they have the demo on October the 10th is on rowzane.com, ROWZANE.com. You can see all the cities that they are having. Thanks, everybody, and we are going to close the room. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.